Hello, Detroit Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. My friends, I'm going to tell you this right now. I absolutely, 100% did not like watching that game. That game was literally, in my honest opinion, and I don't know if it's your opinion or not, it might be, it might not be, but for me, watching that game, I couldn't help but sit there and notice how I was just like, dude, this absolutely sucks. And that's why I have the thumbnail image the way I do, because it was a bitter thing to watch that game. It was a bitter pill to swallow because I'm sitting here and I'm watching this game and I'm like, dude, we should win this game. And even when we got down to the last drive, I was like, dude, we can win this game. We should win this game. Everything else that's been happening in the past, forget it. We have been given the opportunity to win this game. We get the fortune of the Bucs making a bad decision on third down to throw the ball. We get an extra timeout. We get like 45 seconds to work with. We get towards midfield. I'm like, okay, we're dealing with a shortened field. We got a timeout. We're close. Okay, this is where our offense typically does very well. Shortened fields, crunch time situations, this is where our offense does well. But for everything that I would have thought would have happened in this game, the exact opposite happened. Now, I'm going to say this right now and just put this out there first and foremost. Defense played a hell of a game. Defense absolutely played its ass off, and they deserve every amount of recommendation I can give, every ounce of recognition I can give them. They were stellar. They shut down, for the most part, the Bucs passing game. They shut down the freaking run game of the Bucs, and they made Baker Mayfield's life in that pocket over the afternoon an absolute living hell. And obviously, I'm going to talk more about that in depth as we're going forward with other videos. But I wanted to start off there because the defense absolutely deserves all the praise that I can give it because it played absolutely lights out. It was an amazing performance by the defense. Probably, in my honest opinion, the best performance I've ever seen our defense had, because that's a former playoff team that we had. And you know what? While the last game against the Rams, I was very critical of it. I'm looking at this game now, I'm like, okay, here. I can see how this is actually moving in the right direction because it's like, okay, we played against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin the whole day, and we held them for the most part in check. Chris Godwin kind of got loose a couple of times, but for the most part, held them in check, did everything right. I'm absolutely happy with how our defense played. But what I'm not happy with, and what makes this loss so stunning, shocking, whatever term you'd like to use, is just how inconsistent and how sloppy our coaching staff was for the most part, and our offense. Let me talk about the offense here for quite a bit here, because that's probably where the main focus of this video is going to be centered on. I absolutely love Ben Johnson, and I love what he's been able to do here in Detroit over the last, 3 years, now going on 3 years. He's been very creative, very innovative, has created one of the best offenses that we have seen over the last 2 years. But for all of what people are still going to try and tell me about the offense being rusty, and you know what? It might very well still be that. I'm not going to deny it. It still might very well be that it's trying to work out the rust, trying to get back on the same page. Don't deny it. But correct me if I'm wrong, and state your opinions. But when I was watching that game, I don't know if I was just having a vibe, if I was having a feeling, or if it was just something about it, but I just kept getting this unnerving feeling that our offense just is not on the same page. Like, it's not in sync. And it feels like that we're going out there and we're not totally 100% like everybody's operating on the same wavelength, same speed, whatever the case might be. Because there were times I saw plays and it was like, this is a play that normally would work. This is a play that normally we would be able to pop off a good gain, first down, whatever it was. And it just seemed like those types of plays were not working. And for me, one of the things that absolutely bugged me the most about this game, at least from Ben Johnson, was how he continued to use Jahmyr Gibbs versus David Montgomery. Like, David Montgomery was the freaking savior last week. He was the guy that was able to push the pile, make that last drive to get the touchdown. And it was like, if we take a look at the ratio between how much Gibbs was used versus how much Monty was used, it was predominantly Gibbs that was getting most of the touches, most of the plays. But what I couldn't understand is that Gibbs was largely ineffective. Sure, he had a couple of good plays here or there, but it wasn't like he was making a whole bunch of really, really good plays. He almost had a really great play at the end of the game that almost went for a touchdown. But the point of the matter is that over the majority of the game, Gibbs was not being very effective against that Bucs defense. So that was something that kind of troubled me. That was a little bit, awkward, a little bit out of the sort for me, because I was like, usually we are a very balanced team in usage of players and also in terms of play calling. But that was the other thing that bugged me. Like, rather than trying to have a balance on offense between run and pass, it seemed like Ben Johnson was force-feeding the ball to throw it, which leads me into this point. I'm going to say this right now. I'm probably Jared Goff's biggest fan in the world. Ain't no doubt about it. But that was a really bad game by Jared Goff. That was probably one of the worst games I have seen him play in a Lions uniform. Now, what I am going to say is this. That first interception that Goff had, that was not on him. That was a bad call that was not called by the refs for pass interference. Freaking the defensive guy got in front of Jameson Williams. That should have been called. The announcers even knew it should have been called. But somehow it wasn't. But that is not even close to the reality of the remainder of the game. There were several times Goff was, I don't know what it was, but Goff kept freaking lowballing throws. Like, they were going into the dirt. And I was just like, why are these throws getting so low? Like, are you letting go of the ball late? Is there something wrong with the ball? Is there something wrong with your grip? I couldn't understand why. There were times when Goff's accuracy looked on point. But then there were other times it was like the ball was ending up in the receiver's feet, and I just couldn't get that. That was frustrating. But I'll tell you this right now. The absolutely horrendous fact of why Jared Goff, in my opinion, had a very, very bad game, horrible game, horrendous game, whatever you want to call it, was that interception in the fourth quarter. I was literally watching that, and I was like, dude, how could you throw that ball into the middle of the field? Like, I can tell you from this perspective, and I literally heard the announcer say it, and I was like, yep, that's exactly what I thought. You throw the ball into the middle of the field, unless you know somebody is going to be there, you don't do that because you're throwing into the middle of the field. That's where everybody's at. So it's more likely to get intercepted. And it was just like Goff threw it, and it was just like, hey, you know what? It's up for grabs. And it was right into the arms of a Buccaneer defender. And I was just like, dude, that is a horrible mistake. Horrible decision. And that to me was like, you know what? That was just yet another circumstance of how the whole offense played the entire day, in my opinion. It just was not doing the right thing. And it just seemed like we were constantly doing things the wrong way, or we weren't being good enough to actually execute things. Because the other thing about the offense that I didn't like was how the offensive line struggled. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm going to make sure I clarify this very, very to the point. That offensive line had all the starters on it. Every single starter played, and the only one that was actually injured was Penei Sewell because he was, questionable coming into this game with an ankle injury. But what I couldn't understand is why, without Kalijah Kancey, without Vita Vea, we couldn't protect Goff because Goff was constantly under, duress. He was getting pressure. Guys were getting into his face. And it was like, okay, that I don't understand, especially when for, half of the game they're missing their best interior defensive lineman. They're missing one of their edge rushers. I don't know why we're not able to give Goff more time, more protection. Then the second thing that bugged me is I'm like, okay, again, no Vita Vea, no Kalijah Kancey. Kalijah Kancey didn't play the entire game. Vita Vea didn't play the majority of the game. Why is it we can't run the ball? Like, I couldn't understand that. we are an offense that prides ourselves on the ability to ground the ball into a defense and just wear them the hell out. That did not happen. In fact, as we went further into the game, it seemed that we were less willing to run the ball and continued to force it through the air. And obviously, by the time we got to the end of the game, that was the only option we had left. But it just felt like we were not being balanced. We were not staying to the formula that normally works for our offense. So it was just like, dude, everything that normally works for us, we are doing the exact opposite of. We're not getting good, leverage at the offensive point of attack. We're not finding, guys open in the middle of the field or on the outside. We're throwing balls into the dirt, whatever the case was. And, speaking of wide receivers, that was something else that I thought was very peculiar, is that normally our wide receivers have a great ability to get separation. And there have been times I've watched in the past, our wide receivers are wide open. Like, there's nobody around them for like a good 3-5 yards. But it seemed like almost every single time, save that first bomb to Jameson Williams, our guys constantly were covered. And not just covered, they were tightly covered. It seemed to me one of two things was going on. Either our wide receivers could not seem to find a way to get separation against a secondary, mind you, that didn't have their starting free safety, didn't have their third or fourth cornerback out there. So this was an already very thin secondary, and there were guys playing in that secondary that just managed to get off the injury report to play the game. So either our guys couldn't get separation, or, again, going back to coaching here, I kept noticing it when I was seeing the replays. They literally kept showing how what the Bucs defense was doing is that they were pretty much in essence casting a net over the intermediate to deep pattern routes. And they were forcing Goff to have to throw it short. Well, there's a problem there. The problem is that by doing that, it never seemed like we were able to pick up enough yardage to actually get there. And it always seemed like Ben Johnson was trying to push the ball further down the field. And that was not working. I mean, literally, after the first bomb to Jameson Williams, we didn't have really a deep throw all game. Like, it was mostly checkdowns the majority of the game. And it was like, dude, we are not changing our offensive approach here. We're not trying to run the ball. We're not trying to take what the defense is giving us. We're trying to force stuff here. And I couldn't understand that. And it was quite plainly obvious that the players on offense, they were frustrated, especially Goff. Goff was obviously frustrated because he didn't think that the refs were calling a fair game, which I don't think they were, at least in terms of pass interference, because they called Terry and Arnold on that nonsense, but they didn't call it on the freaking Buccaneers cornerbacks at least 2 times. So Goff was frustrated. And I mean, we kept seeing several shots of Ben Johnson. He was clearly frustrated. So to me, it's like, okay, there was something clearly going on with that offense that was not operating the way it should. And quite honestly, between the coaching snafus, which obviously there was the stuff that I'm talking about with Ben Johnson, but also with that freaking, at the very end of the half when, we have 2 seconds left, and because the freaking, field goal team rushes out onto the field because no coach is holding them back to wait until Goff snaps the ball to spike it. Oh, that's right. We get a penalty. There's a 10-second runoff. We don't get those 3 points. Those 3 points would have been a huge, huge, huge difference in this game. Because if we had those 3 points, instead of being down 20-16 towards the end of the game, we would have been down 20-19. And rather than having to force ourselves to try and get a touchdown, oh, that's right, we've just run down the clock, we get a field goal, win, we go home. So that right there was a huge, huge critical error on Dan Campbell's part, because Dan Campbell admitted he was the guy that had the fault on that one. So for me, it's just like, dude, bad coaching awareness, bad coaching management, and, very sloppy, very inconsistent offensive performance is what I attribute to this very stunning, shocking loss against the Bucs. And again, not because the Bucs won, but because that was not how our team normally plays. I haven't seen our team perform that bad on an overall front, save the defense, in a long time. But anyway, I'm going to end this episode because I think I've done my part of explaining where I have my issues. So having said that, I'm going to end the episode and say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, please, I also want to highly encourage y'all to turn on the bell notification icon as well. So that way you guys don't miss any more content that I push out. I also want to encourage y'all, please, make sure you share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel grows and the greater the channel spreads. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the content. I hope you all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. And whether you've been a long-time viewer or you're a first-time viewer, I hope you enjoyed the content, and I hope you got something in your life that makes you, just happy despite the loss today. Having said that, I just want to say go Lions, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.